it comes down to even deeper layers of like what you believe about your own self-worth and your voice, the validity of your voice. Hi. Hello.
This morning is hilarious.
It's been a situation.
I hate the saying it rains, when it rains, it pours, but it does feel like that. It's like whenever tech takes a shit or something, it's just like across the board. And then I'm like, what is happening?
I know. And
And
we're just like,
we just like jumped right in.
Up.
Yeah.
I know. But we're showing up, and I love that about us.
And I think it's fun. Like, I want to call out the fact that, like, just before this, you were, like, getting me to take deep breaths and stuff. And I was, like, crying a little and being frustrated with work. I'm experiencing a lot of growing pains at work, I think, just because my team is growing really fast and there's so many, like, touch points. And with that always comes, like, just things that need to be troubleshooted, smoothed out, refined, and I know that. And this morning I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a nice like zen mountaintop morning. I need that. I've been getting up and starting work at like 6 a.m. and then like working until like 5, 6 in the evening. And that's not like how I typically operate. And I'm not really like down for that to be my new normal, but I know that it's because I'm growing. And I think it's just catching up with me.
I know. I can tell that you're feeling a little fatigued and exhausted. But I like how you're framing it growing pains, because it's even like how I kind of always described like when I was so sick when I was pregnant, and I was sick and puking and nauseous all the time. But it wasn't like, I kept trying to say like, it's not like having the flu. It's because even though I was sick and it felt horrible and I was like barely like functioning, I was still like, I knew it was because something amazing was happening. And even though it like, I totally cried about it and I totally like whined about it and I like struggled, I still deep down knew this is good. This is because something good is happening. And it kind of like, I feel like that's what you're experiencing, like the hard, and
I have
sucks.
to remind
it doesn't take
myself
any of the
that.
hard away.
Because I've been having these moments of like, what is happening? And then I'm like, it's because you've just added like 4 people to your team in the last like month. Like that's not even that, like 2 weeks. And then like, it's just like getting them educated and, it's okay. It's okay. My little mantra I've always done, because I've always had periods of hustle when you are like building that next like level for yourself, I think is like important. So my little mantra is always like, you're building more freedom, you're building more flexibility, you're building more like opportunity. Because that's usually what's happening, but it's very easy to forget and just feel like everything is fucked.
Do you ever like, I had this feeling so strong the other day where, because I had stuff like coming at me like through my phone, and it was just like things coming at me that were very triggering, and things I was listening to that was like really hard. And I remember I was just thinking, I was like, you know what the problem is my phone. Like,
except for it's the people, I think, on the other side.
I know, but I was like, I can't fix that, but I could throw my phone off of a fucking like bridge.
I think that's it. And then it's just gone. I'm just going to do that and see what happens. I fixed the problem. I just threw my phone into a river.
No, I like just let my mind go there, and I let myself like imagine like how like temporarily satisfying it would be to just chuck my phone, chuck my computer, and then be like, nobody can talk to me. Nobody's allowed to talk to me. Like,
followed by like
for like a minute.
Until you're like,
I'm like, I need to call Sarah.
And then you're like, fuck, I have to replace my phone and my laptop. What have I done?
I've ruined my life. Yeah, no, but it's like, I do have those overwhelming feelings sometimes. And I was reading that Derek Sivers book that you gave me, the How to Live.
How do you like it?
I actually really love it.
I had a feeling you would.
Because I really admire this structure, and I want to read that. I actually ordered that the book that he based the structure on. Isn't
Mhm.
it called Some?
Some, mhm.
I'm excited to read that. But because he takes an idea and pushes it to the nth degree, right?
Uh-huh.
And really like curates that idea. And one of them was like about being detached from everything all the time and not needing anything ever. And reading that was really like soothing to me. Just like reading about, and it was this very like, maybe like monk
Listen,
like, just
the
detached from the
amount of
world.
time yes, the amount of times I'm like, what would happen if I just like stopped responding to all my emails and went into the woods?
Right.
And like, because for me, something that I have, and I think it's a very Enneagram 2 thing, is when I get overwhelmed, I tend to feel overwhelmed by all the like bids and requests in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I just
Yeah.
feel like everyone like needs me in some capacity, and I'm like, I don't want to be like needed or relied upon for like 12
A
hours.
second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
And
I
I'm
just like
sure
breathe
it
for a
reminds
second?
me of like how moms tend to feel when their kids are just like, because it's constant bids for affection,
Yeah.
just like
Doesn't stop. Yeah.
relentless. And so I know that's like a thing for me. Because normally I don't like 99% of the time, I don't feel like that. It's just when I get
Mm.
overwhelmed, I'm like, "Oh my god, everyone,
Mm.
please. I need a second."
Well, it's that like
But most of the time
overstimulate it's
I
that like overstimulated thing. Yeah, totally. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I get that. Like I remember like freaking out and being like, I just need to not be touched. Like I need to
Oh, I'm
not be touched for
sure.
like 5 minutes. And I'm gonna just like go put myself in a timeout, and I lock myself in the bathroom and just like
Yes.
breathe and like have a minute. But it's kind of like your brain is having that. Like, I
Yeah, I'm
just need
like,
to not be
"Please,
touched right now,
for like
you know?
an hour or something." And the
Yeah.
thing is it's not even I don't know, once I get into it, I'm always better. It's more when there's things floating around that need to be fixed. But once I'm like fixing
Mm.
things, I feel super empowered and good and
Yeah.
excited and energized. It's just like, I don't know. But I do love like one of the things I love is because we had a whole moment of like, can we even record a podcast right now? Because I was crying.
Mhm.
And I just love the
Yeah.
idea of like showing up even when like shit is hard and doesn't feel just
Yeah.
right. Because so often like
Mhm.
that can be the thing that like pulls you into a new energy. And I feel like the podcast is that for me. Like once we start
Mhm.
talking, I'm like, okay, I'm in it and I'm fine. It's more like
Yeah.
the anticipation of it all
Mhm.
or honestly just like how we've kind of given ourselves permission to not be like in the best place in life to like record a podcast.
Yeah.
um it feels so much more right and real, and I don't know what I
I
want to
mean, I think
be
that's
doing.
yeah, that's the only way I think it like works. Like for me and you at least. Like I don't think I can. I don't know. I can't. I'm no good at like manufacturing
Yeah.
um something
Yeah.
other than like what I just like it's on me all the time, my heart, my feelings. And I don't know, I think it's just we're human, and I want
Mhm.
to show up that way, and sometimes things are fucking hard. And but I always leave this feeling I always leave our like podcast feeling like really good, like and
Me
feeling
too. That's
like
why I
I've
was so
learned
glad you didn't give
something.
up on me.
I
Yes.
know. I was like, maybe we should just. Do you want to just talk, me and you?
I was like,
Oh man.
because the thing is it's not even that I feel like I need to talk about it. I feel like I have
Mm.
a laundry list of things I need to do. You know what I
It's
mean?
this the put out the fires. Yeah.
It's the and the thing
Yeah.
is I really got to say like when I step back and look at everything big picture, like I'm not putting out fires that often. It just feels like in the last week there've been like quite a few. And that feel to
Yeah.
me that always freaks me out because it's like, well, what am I doing something wrong?
Right.
But it's
Right.
not. We've just like started using like two new pieces of complicated software. Like we literally have someone
Mm.
whose like job it is to like fix it and make it completely custom to us,
Wow.
And like that is the whole thing because I'm like, no, this is what I need it to do. And then he like goes and fixes it, but then it makes it like worse. And I'm like,
Oh gosh.
yeah. So there's a little bit of that.
A little bit of
uh,
that, no
and like
biggie.
all tech stuff makes me want to cry. Like all tech stuff.
Same.
Like when it's like
Same. 100%. Do you see my
well, that's what
my printer in the background? I have like cried into that thing.
well, that's why when we were trying to
Like
set up the
tears.
camera, I was like, I literally cannot set up this camera right now. Like I have no capacity for
I was like,
anything tech related.
This is a hard boundary. We'll do that another time.
I was like, I can't do anything tech related right now. My patience for that is 0.
And my like literacy is like very low.
We're like
so
the blind
I need
leading
you.
the blind. No,
We're
actually,
not.
we're like I feel like I'm a little less blind than you. So it's like
Yeah. You have like one eye and I have
Yes.
0 eyes.
Exactly. So I've got no like depth perception when it comes to tech.
But somebody like poked you in the eye really bad this morning.
Yeah.
And you're like, we're not going nowhere.
My eyes, like my one good eye is like watering,
like
and I'm
watering.
like, I can't. I'm like, I can't be the one leading us. We need to just lay in this field.
This is kind of like a grotesque. I'm like picturing us with like canes and stuff.
Yes. Listen, this is sometimes how it is, okay? You don't have to be like, you don't have to have a PhD in tech to help someone. You just have to be one step in front of them. And I feel like I'm only one step in front of you when it comes to
You're
tech
like
stuff.
a Google search. Like,
I'm like,
you tried Google searching this?
I know, I was so sassy. I'm so sorry. I was like, did you Google how to set up your fucking camera, Emily?
I'm like, of course I didn't, Sarah. Of course I did not.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
Anyway.
You're here, though.
We're doing it. And we really, I mean, do we want to jump into limiting beliefs that keep us small? Because I feel like we got lots of those.
Yeah.
Tech? Being a
we
woman?
Have lots of, I mean, yeah.
Being
like,
assertive? Oh man, I feel like I've gotten so much more comfortable being assertive over the years, and that is such a lovely one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is like, especially like assertiveness to me kind of roots in like masculine feminine energies, and like how there is like an expectation when you're presenting a certain gender to adhere to certain, traditional energies that accompany that gender. And assertiveness is definitely attributed more to a masculine energy. And I think and there's all the conversations that are happening around that, how like if a man is forceful, it's assertiveness, and if a woman is forceful, she's a fucking bitch,
Yeah.
and how like perceptions are warped and there's a double standard there. And that's so interesting to push back on, because not only are when you're choosing to be assertive, not only are you stepping into an energy that maybe you're not very familiar with, but you're also pushing back against the judgment that's coming at you for doing that. So there's like so many layers of things in that kind of like thinking about growing in that way. And the same applies to like the other way around, like a masculine like grounded person like crying or showing up really vulnerable or confused or feeling tender in that way, like that person is going to have to do the same process, push back against the judgment. And it's like we have all these like constructs around gender that I've been thinking about and I find really interesting, and they keep us small, when in reality we get to be whatever collection of those energies that we want to be, and it has nothing to do with what our bodies look like in our genitalia, really. Like it has everything to do with just like, how do you want to show up in the world,
And I also think it's really interesting because I think it's so ingrained in us that even when we feel like we're pretty open-minded and we are pushing back on this, like we still, I think a lot of us, including myself, maybe I should just focus on myself, like every now and then I'll see like, some conditioning around that like pop up, like when a guy, is being extra sensitive or something, like I catch myself being like, seriously? You know what I mean? rather.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, you actually have told me a story about a friend of yours with I think a son who like is very sensitive, and how she was like
Mm-hmm.
catching herself being like, oh man, I actually like have a hard time when he's like real sensitive. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
don't, subscribe to the idea that like boys should be ultra like masculine and not talk about their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like when you can have grace for yourself and notice your own conditioning in that area, I mean, that's where you can actually grow, because then it's not a blind spot. You're like, oof, man,
Right.
I got that. I
Oh,
got that in
I
there.
have
I
a
have some
belief here.
biases.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. For sure.
So, and the
That's a good one.
assertive
I
one in
mean,
particular. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. No, no, no. Let's go there. Let's talk about
The
assertiveness.
assertive one, I feel like my whole life I've been, I think that I tend to hang out in a lot of like masculine energies, and I've always kind of
Mm-hmm.
have. Even as a kid, I was called a tomboy. I
Mm-hmm.
think because I'm very like physical and have a lot of energy. Um, I mean, when you talk about kids with like that are diagnosed ADD, ADHD, which I was, there's often in like the studies and the like literature on it is like boys with ADD and ADHD get more attention in studies because they're not as quiet or reserved or like
Mm.
timid, or like, girls are like, I think because a lot of like the conditioning of like what it is to be, um I guess, a girl, and again, I'm obviously
Yeah.
speaking like gross generalizations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And stereotypes here, but yeah, and so I remember from a young age being called like a tomboy, and I've always been pretty assertive. Like I was often called bossy growing up.
Mm.
Um and I think so it was a little bit more comfortable for me, but I still like really softened my asks. And in teaching people copywriting and working with so many women, it's become very clear to me in working with women and men, how men are just so much more comfortable, usually right out the gate, being pretty assertive in their copy,
Mm.
and women
Mm.
needed to have it pointed out to them. So like for example, I'll be reviewing a student's website, and they'll be like, I can help doctors grow. I can help you grow the number of patients in your practice, right? And I'm like, you actually don't need to say I can. You can just say I help doctors grow the
Mm.
number of
Mm-hmm.
patients. And it's like mind blowing for women, because they're like, it
Right.
sounds
Right.
so aggressive. Like,
So
but like
bold. Like, yeah.
but like maybe I can. I'm like, both statements are true. And you're saying like I help. You're not saying I am 100% going to help you. It's just one is more assertive. And
Yeah.
I don't know, whenever I point it out to women, they're like, oh man, like that's so true. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. We are
Um
so like, even I know it's so deep, even in the languaging and everything like that, like these like energies that have been put on us based on our gender. You telling that story reminded me of a class I took in college. I cannot even remember what the class was, but
mhm,
we were talking about essentially this, like the gender bias and like all
mm,
the energies and expectations put on men and women. And and oh no, you know what, I'm remembering here, it's coming back to me. It was a communications class, and we were talking
mhm,
about body language. That's what we were talking about, and
mm.
in this kind of concept. And I remember the professor stopped and he looked around and he started laughing. He's like, just nobody move. Like, nobody move your body, but I want you to use your eyes and like look around the room right now.
Mhm.
All the dudes were like full man spread, like full legs out, arms out. All the girls were tucked in, like legs crossed, tucked in, like little pretzels,
Yeah.
with their heads tilted, looking.
Yeah.
And he's like, look at the body language here. And I remember that was the first time I ever really like considered that or thought about it. And ever since then, I've been really aware of, not all the time, but
Right,
of like
right.
when I'm making myself look small,
Physically smaller.
submissive,
Mhm.
physically smaller, look really approachable, really soft, like really like, and instead of looking, whatever,
Mhm.
taking up room. And so, and I remember like I took that further. Like I remember trying to man spread a little bit in college,
I've always
and
manspreaded.
it just like see, I love this about you so much.
My mom
It
would always be
it
like, "Sit like a lady." She would literally say that to me, and I would be like, "I am not a lady." I would
I
like say
love
it,
that so
sass it
much.
right back. She would be like, "That is
I
not ladylike," and I was like, "That's not what I'm trying to go for." But thanks, mom. I was so
Yeah,
annoying. I was
like
so
I
annoying.
remember sitting in, I don't know, like I feel like I was in like a subway or something like that. I was like riding with a bunch of people, and I was just being like man spreaded on top of, and I was like trying to like man spread my, like take my territory back like from the knees that were coming under me.
We've
And
all
then I
experienced
also
that.
totally. I also remember in college, in like one of whatever, I'm walking through the buildings, and I remember another thing that I noticed, and I can't remember if it was in the class it was pointed out, but if you're walking, somebody who, like, and to go with our stereo, it's going to be really hard
Yeah.
we're just going to stereotype men and women, but I want you guys to know that we acknowledge the gender spectrum. We
Oh,
acknowledge all of that
$100%.
it is not a bias like that. We love all the things. We just, for the sake of like words coming out of our mouth, I'm just going to say men and
Well,
women, and
yeah, and
please just
also
understand I'm saying masculine, feminine energies.
I think it's important to state that, like, while this I know from it because I know you and I know your heart, like, this isn't, like, how we, like, think, but this is still how a majority of people, like, think. That's why that's, like, part of the
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
problem, and so I think that's also what you're
Yeah.
highlighting here, is, like, how this is
Yeah.
problematic, right? So, anyway.
It really
Yes.
is. And even like our languaging, our language limitations are problematic too. It's very
Oh,
frustrating.
oh, totally.
Um, yeah. And so anyway, so the idea, and this was my experiment, is that
Mhm.
like walking through a hallway, a man is going to expect like the energy that's happening is the woman will step aside so the man can keep
Mhm.
going in his path. And I remember being like, is that really true? And I decided, I'm walking down like down this busy hallway with all the students running around, and I was just going to stay straight on my path. And Sarah, I cannot tell you how many dudes I ran smack into, like
But
full
only
force, like
dudes.
straight. Oh yeah, because they
Oh
would
my
not step
god.
aside for me. I'm walking assertively, strong, assertive, stepping, walking, and they wouldn't step aside for me, and we would just run
You're
into each other. It was like
so
a game of chicken.
I'm sorry, but you're so cute and I love you. I love when you're like strong, assertive, walking.
Like I'm going places. Like get out of
Yes.
my fucking way. No, like they were just gonna walk right over me, just steamroll me, and so that was so interesting.
I'm
Like
not
even just
surprised by that at all.
no,
At
it's a funny. I mean,
all.
go try the experiment. It's like it was proven correct to me when I tried it when I was in college. And I
Listen,
remember
and
just being
that's
like, that's
something
so interesting.
and that's something that I've also realized is like when you're not used to being assertive in a way that's not rude or overbearing or aggressive, it feels aggressive. And so I think
Yes.
oftentimes when they're first like starting out, it's just so apparent in like language choice and copywriting. I can't help but like tie it back to that. Um that when they're first starting out and like practicing being assertive, like they're like I feel so rude, that's what I
Yes.
hear. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, that's
Yeah.
so interesting that we've been like told that like if we're assertive, it's rude. And if men are assertive, it's just, oh, boys being boys.
Confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
it's crazy. It's crazy.
This point that you made is so good, because I think that feeling, the inflated hypersensitive feeling
Mm-hmm.
that people can have when trying to embody another energy
Yes.
prevents
Yes.
prevents you from doing that and growing in that way. It can be applied in so many different areas. Like for instance, maybe if you're like trying self-care and trying to maybe focus on yourself a little bit more and do
It feels
something for yourself,
overindulgent.
you're going to feel like you're selfish.
Yes, or
It's going to be
selfish.
like this
Yep.
really inflated feeling.
That
And
actually
and the thing is, yeah.
Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
no,
I'm
go ahead with
just
your thought.
No,
Oh,
you go. No, after you.
you go.
No, you go.
After you. No, but that's like that thing right there. And I don't know if I've heard too many people talk about it, but I think that keeps you small when you don't have somebody. You need to have people to bounce off, like, what's happening, like, am I being selfish? Somebody that you trust, and they're going to be like, no, going to get your nails done isn't selfish. And then you could be like, okay, it feels really self-indulgent, but I'm going to practice, like, doing something nice for myself. Or same thing with assertiveness, same thing with, like, just like, like, and then we can go the other side of the spectrum. Like, I'm going to practice being more vulnerable, and I
Mhm.
feel really weak, or I
Mhm.
feel really like whatever. And is that the case? Is that true? And having people that you trust and respect that are going to speak truth into your life to, like, support you practicing that and pushing through those feelings to ultimately, I think, be like a more well-rounded, well-adjusted human being that can express, like, a range of different energies, which I think is, like, really healthy, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny that like I have so many thoughts. One of them is that actually I had a therapist one time tell me this because they were like, "Listen," because I was so I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it was something along the lines of me being concerned that like I was being selfish, or like self-care was selfish, or being assertive was being too aggressive, and like feeling like I didn't have a clear idea of like what the like proper like balance was and things, and I was like
Mm.
second guessing myself and checking in with them, like, making sure that it was like I wasn't swinging too hard to the like, I don't know, assertive, aggressive, domineering, selfish, like being bad, basically, right? Or things I didn't want to be. And the therapist, I'll never forget, he looked at me and he goes, typically, if you're like real concerned that you're being too aggressive and you're like, am I being too aggressive? Is this too aggressive? I don't know. That felt really aggressive. He's like, it generally means that you're not, because you're like overly worried
Aware of it. Yeah.
about going that far. He's like, like narcissists are not usually like, am I a narcissist? Because I've like
Are they taking
literally,
advantage of people?
yes,
Yeah.
am I manipulative? Because he's like, people who are generally like really manipulative aren't like sitting there worried about whether or not they're being manipulative. He was like, this is obviously like there's
100%.
exceptions to this rule, but if you're like real worried that you're being too aggressive as you practice being assertive, you're probably okay. Like, and like
Yeah.
obviously you might have moments where you're like, that was like I
It was
swung too
a little
hard, because
much.
I think that's
Yeah.
been my experience too. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be more assertive or something. Sometimes I like swing a little hard the other direction. Like when you first start setting boundaries, we were laughing about
Yeah.
that a lot when you were visiting. Like when you first set boundaries and you're not very good at setting boundaries, and how like you might be real awkward and like, this is a boundary. And like maybe not
Yes.
so graceful in your execution of this
Yes.
new part of yourself you're trying out. And so like there is a period to have some grace for yourself when you're doing that.
100%.
Yeah, but that's been my experience. Is usually I'm like
Yeah.
obsessed with like, oh no, am I like being too much of like this thing that I'm like afraid I'll swing too hard that direction? And usually, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that framing it that way gives you so much permission to, like, trust yourself, maybe? Like,
Mhm.
trust yourself that, like, because you are empathetic and aware enough to be sensitive to the fact that you might be being too aggressive to the people around you, you can just trust that you can find that equilibrium, and that you'll notice when
Mhm.
you maybe did a little do too much, and then you'll know how to, like, reel it back in. I mean, it's just like, yeah, it's having that self-trust. I mean, and then it's just like anything ever that you're doing for the first time, like, you give
Yeah.
yourself grace to, like, learn how to do it. I mean, I tell this to my youngest, Lila. She has a little bit more of a she has like an intense reaction to when she's trying something for the first time and it doesn't work out and she fails, or it's like hard. She
Mhm.
can, like, it's just really tough on her. And so I've had to, like, I'll go through these series of questions with her. I remember one of the big ones was around learning to rollerblade. And I remember
Mm.
like she was like falling and like having a hard time, and she's just like, I'm never gonna be able to do this. And I just was like, hey Lila, when you were a little baby and you were trying to start walking, did you walk perfectly the first time you tried to do it? She's like, no. I'm like, did you walk perfectly the 10th time you tried to do it? No, I didn't. You know? And I was just like that, like you got to give yourself a chance to learn how to do it. And know what, even when you were like taking those 2 steps and then you fell, guess what I was doing? I was cheering for you, and I was so excited because you were trying and you kept trying. And so
Mhm.
we like always tell those stories, and I think it just like fucking applies, like it applies to us as big little kids, you know? And
Yes.
that like to give yourself grace to practice and be clumsy, and to lean into trusting yourself to find an equilibrium and trust like the fact that you are an empathetic
Mm.
sensitive human being, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
I love that. I
Totally.
love that way of looking at it.
I think I've told this story before, but one thing that like always pops into my mind is I posted a video on my Instagram of like a day in my life or whatever. As
Hmm.
a copywriter is not a day in my life recently. I'll say that.
No.
I guess I've been like working like a maniac.
Can we make that video?
It's just like me stuck in
Just
this
you like
chair
yelling.
with these lights shooting in my eyes and feeling like and yeah, and not
Oh
understanding why tech
man.
doesn't work.
I don't understand why this isn't working.
Um,
But okay, so
yeah, but it
you
was
did a video, a day in the
yeah, and it was
life.
like when I have my nice morning routines that I really like to do, and that felt good, and I included that, and someone commented on it, and it like didn't bother me at all. It's just like stuck in my mind because I was like, oh gosh, right. And he was just like, wow, this seems so self indulgent, and I was just
Mm,
like, you're right. It does when you're used to like working, like when you have the belief system that you're
suffering.
supposed to
Yeah.
like drive an hour to your office and work 9 to 5 for a company and like have no time for yourself. And like what is virtuous is like working your ass off to provide for your family, but like not having any time for them or yourself and like suffering. And I just was like, and
Yeah.
so it just reminded me really like how far I had come, that like I have such a wonderful luxurious ability to have a nice slow morning, which I'm sure might change in the future, but um yeah, and I just was like I mean I responded to it. I was just like, I can totally see how this might seem self-indulgent. Like I get it, you know, but
Yeah.
it did. I'm like, but this is like why I do what I do, so I can have the first few hours of the day are not given to some company that's not me. Like that's a core value of
Yeah.
mine, and I've like worked my ass off to like build that, and yeah, I don't know. So it's just, but it's like, it's interesting how you can see things like that and think, wow, that's like really self indulgent. But that's just totally based in his own beliefs around like what it means to be like a
Right.
good human. And we
Yeah.
like, I already know we have very different views of what that means. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that it
Mm-hmm.
can't change. I used to think that. I used to think it was like virtuous to be poor and suffering and really struggling day to day, and I don't really believe that anymore. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like a
And then
interesting
that's
reminder.
a great like way to highlight it, because and there might even be like a layer of this, you know, I mean we don't know, which this is speculation,
Mm-mm.
but that like the reaction to seeing that is like, oh wow, like deep down, like that would feel so amazing to be able to do that, and I don't get to do that in my life. Like
Mhm.
I don't get to have that. I don't believe I'm ever going to be able to have that. I don't know
Mhm.
how to even begin to do that.
Mhm.
And so then the reaction is, because that's something that is such a deep desire that has is not something I can achieve, is to make that
Mhm.
be not okay to have or exist, and to
Right.
shut that
That's
down.
what
And
a
that's
lot
the
That's what
shadowy
a lot of
stuff, you know.
judgments are.
100%.
Ultimately is like when oftentimes I mean, you can have judgments when you're like, wow, I really think this person's being a shitty person. But when it's something like how they spend their time or how they spend their money or how they dress, like, first of all, your judgments aren't like hurting that person unless you're lashing out. They're just hurting you, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But two, there's usually something there. I had a student once share a story with me how she used to judge people who posted their videos, referring to me, of them dancing or especially pole dancing on Instagram as like just being
Oh,
like super
interesting.
attention seeking. And I was like, oh, that's
Uh-huh.
so interesting. Like, I can totally see how you think that. And she was like, but I realized that I just was actually a little envious of how like free you felt in your body, that you could like confidently post
Yes.
that on Instagram. And I was like, well, little insight. I don't feel like super confident every time I post those things, but I'm really proud of the work I've done and the strength that I've built and the skill that's like really growing. And that's where the like posting that comes from. Cause I'm like, it's hard. Like, it's really, really hard pole dancing. And so as you grow, like, it's something you're proud of. And that's why people like put it
Yeah.
on Instagram. Or I'm sure there are people who put it on Instagram because they're a little bit of an exhibitionist and like, don't follow them if that bothers you. But like,
Right, right.
there's so many reasons that like you would want to share this like wonderful thing with the world. And it was great. It was actually really lovely that we got to have a conversation about it, because she basically was like, I was totally judging you for posting pole on Instagram. And I was like, I can totally see why. I get that. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's something I'm super proud of and I'm never going to stop. So,
Right. This
yeah.
this like idea, whatever this is called, is is like a major hack to like inner growth and
Mm.
like becoming more actualized as a human. And it's an amazing hack because you don't have to wait for suffering to happen to get you to grow in these areas, because you can use your
Ooh.
judgments of people as an indicator that you have a limiting belief that is inside you
Mm.
that wants to be integrated and wants to grow into acceptance. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and again, this isn't across the
A
board, but
hundred
when
percent.
like how you pointed out, these like judgments about people that we have, and then it's very much rooted in I would never, I could never, I'm not allowed, or I don't have permission.
Mm-hmm.
Those this is like such a good tool. Those are areas for growth. Those are areas in you that are just dying to
Mm-hmm.
like have a need met and to be integrated and to experience like a liberation in your life. And so, tips with Emily and Sarah, this is a good hack. And
It
it's really
really
nice because
is.
you can do it on your own time. You actually don't really even need to interact with anybody else, and you don't have to wait until that part of you is causing like deep pain and suffering in your life or something like that for you to notice it. You could just notice it through the little micro judgments that you have going throughout your day. Like, I remember when
Yeah.
I first realized about that, I had a judgment. This was like early on in like the Instagram days, and it was when people were
Mm-hmm.
starting to post selfies. I feel like I might have talked about this before,
Everyone's had,
but
everyone judged selfies. I think people forget that. Are you
yeah.
talking about judging selfies?
Well, I did we talk about judging selfies? But like, I'm
Mm.
going to talk about judging selfies.
Well, listen, even
It
if we
was
haven't,
so
I
weird.
think I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but listen, this isn't just you. This is a generational thing. I've had this conversation with
Mm-hmm.
like Gen Z people. They grew up with selfies. They don't remember a time where selfies were like not a thing. It's a whole
Right.
shift, because you're not the only one who judged selfies. I think we all did. It was considered super like narcissistic. I remember like vain
Right.
being, those two words being thrown around super
I mean,
casually for
it's
like,
one thing
how
to take
dare
a
you?
picture of yourself and another thing to take a picture of yourself and then post it on the internet for people to like. I was just like, I remember just being like the audacity. Like, I just like
I know.
I didn't even like understand. But I remember like observing people posting selfies, and my thoughts were like, I think people are trying to understand themselves in a certain way. Like, they're trying to like they're bouncing their image off of like the internet and the people on the internet and getting reactions, and they're trying to understand something about themselves in context to the internet and the world at large. And I remember finding it like really fascinating. But there was somebody I was friends with who started posting these like and to me, it felt really self-indulgent. It was like these emotional, it felt attention seeking. And I remember they were very triggering to me, and I felt triggering a judgment in me. And I remember being bothered with myself and being like, why am I so judgy? I like this person. I think this person's amazing. I think they're a good person. And like, why am I being so like catty and judgy about this? And I realized I had this like moment where I was like, this has nothing to do with her. This has everything to do with how the fact that I do not give myself permission to be seen like that. I do
Yeah.
not give myself permission to share with the world and to expect or hope for people to witness and see me and hold space for me. And I do not allow myself to do that. And I do not feel I deserve that. And
Yeah.
I remember just being like, wow, that needs to be like that needs to be reframed completely. And then I remember I had my first like big post, I would say, on like that on Instagram. It like took me forever to get my guts up, but I posted the selfie and I like shared an emotional thought about like, these things I've been thinking about. And it was really liberating for me, but it was like a limiting belief that was just holding me back. And my protectors were coming out in judgment to keep me looking outside myself instead of realizing that the root of that issue was in how I was limiting myself. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that is
Yeah.
like such an amazing skill to have, and it brings so much richness into your life when you can interpret those judgments in a way that
And it
you can actually grow. Yeah,
And it brings ease because, like, judgment is not a good feeling. I don't
it's
really, even if
exhausting.
it's like
Yeah,
something that, maybe you still disagree in the end. You're like, I still like don't, I would not spend my like time, money, life the way that person does. Maybe you still like wouldn't do that for yourself, but it's literally not their life is not for you to like, for them to
mm,
like, to shape shift their life to match what you think is important. Like, that's just like the core belief there is that I value the diversity of like expression and experience in humanity. And like, I don't know, I've seen people like, I see people where I'm like, wow, and those clothes, like that is just like, what is happening there? You know what I mean? But
mm-hmm.
it's like, but they're being themselves. And like that, my value of wanting people to be more themselves is like so, so important. And so, yeah, I just think it's a really interesting
Yeah,
thing. I also have been thinking every now and then about, I wonder, like, because oftentimes the negative association with some things that we're kind of like talking about and have a theme of being attention seeking. And lately, actually, I've been kind of asking myself, like, what is wrong with being attention seeking? If you don't want like to give your attention to that person, that's fine. You can like literally unsubscribe, unfollow, not be friends with them. But like, I don't understand. I am actually like wondering, like, is attention seeking like actually inherently bad, or is that just something that
ooh,
we've come to think is, or something like an old school belief? Like, what? I don't know. Like, it might not be.
that's an
I mean, think
interesting
about the people
thought.
in our lives whose literal jobs are attention seeking: actors, performers, musicians. It's like those are like socially acceptable forms of like attention seeking being at the core of
Hmm.
like what they give to the world. But we just don't call it
Mm-hmm.
that. It's like the area in which you're allowed to be attention seeking, and we
Right.
celebrate it. If you're an athlete and you want to be like real like grandiose and a crazy character, then people are
You're
like, I
allowed
don't
to
know, I just
then. Yeah.
you're allowed to. But if you're just, some girl on Instagram who's being attention seeking, it's like, ew, gross. And I'm like, I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with being attention seeking. Maybe you're a
Yeah.
performer. Maybe you're, I don't know. Maybe you're an
I
artist.
think that's like a really interesting thought. And I think if we could dig into what attention seeking is and maybe where the
Mm-hmm.
negative connotation comes from it, because I do think and I'm just spitballing here. Um, maybe there's this idea of an energy that a person can come at anybody else with, which is I need external validation to feel okay about myself. And that feels bad.
Mm,
If
mhm.
anybody picks up on that on an energetic level, it feels desperate. It feels
That's
unsafe,
true.
unstable. And then
Mhm.
I think there's a distinction to be made between I want external validation and I'm stable in who I think I am as a person.
Mhm.
And that's like a different, and I think that's a different energy. That's like where maybe like these people in professions that are very much about interacting with attention on with large scale audiences. These people like I don't know. Well, maybe that gets kind of nuanced there,
I
but
was gonna say, I think it's a
um
blurry place because you can't.
it's a blurry place. Yeah.
It's because it's impossible to say that everyone who is like successful and in the limelight doesn't have like insecurities. That's like an impossibility. Like, sure, maybe you're a confident person, but you're still gonna have periods of time where you're like having major periods of self doubt. I think that's
I
so
mean, and
normal.
when your like livelihood depends on the attention that you're getting from
Mm-hmm.
people, like that's like stressful on like a whole other level. And but I do think
I
that
know.
there is a sense of self, maybe like a sense of like um what the need is there. Like is this like I'm sharing myself and I'm wanting an interaction with people, or is it like I am grabbing and I need something? I don't know, because I've definitely like I totally I've recognized I'm bored, I want some interaction, I want attention. And it can be with people in my life. It could
Mm-hmm.
be with online, and I try to just call it out for what it is, especially if it's like in person. I just try to be like, I need attention right now. Like I am in need of
Yeah,
attention,
because I
and I
think
think that there isn't anything inherently wrong with that. No,
no,
yeah,
I don't. And I think that a lot of bringing it back to women tend to think that for them to ask for attention is a bad thing. And it's like, I don't know,
mm,
I used to like think that kind of like really lean into like being ultra independent and not needing people, like that felt more safe, right? And now, as I've practiced asking for my needs to be met, especially from my like partner, um I don't know. I'll literally like roll on the floor in front of Ben while he's working and be like, I need attention.
oh my god, that's so cute. Yeah,
And then,
like a
like me,
puppy.
with Loki, like two of us, and we're like, pay
Yeah,
attention to
we need
us.
attention.
Literally, that's what dogs are. They're literal, just like attention seeking whores. No, I'm just
Attention
kidding.
whores, little fuzzy furry whores.
And there's nothing wrong with them doing that. No, I'm just kidding. But
Mm, that actually
that
is a
is
great point.
That's literally like Loki's life is like, look at me, please,
Yeah,
please,
give me
please
attention.
touch me. And we're
And like
like,
standing on your counter to get
oh my God.
attention.
Yes. That was so insane. We were just sitting there working outside in the sunshine, having a nice business meeting. And I just look over your shoulder, and Loki is legit sitting on the kitchen counter,
On the
peering
freaking
out the
counter.
window, which is like eye height,
Like there
eye
was
level.
nothing but it was like because he has like as many expressions as a human, I feel he was just there was nothing like nothing wrong with like this was perfectly
Oh,
normal and acceptable.
he did not know what he was doing was wrong because he's never jumped up on the counter before. And so, and also his legs are so stubby and short.
I
Like no
don't
one.
understand the physics of how that worked. I honest to God have no idea.
I have no idea. But I like went over and was like, get down. But also I was like laughing. So it was like not my real serious voice. And he was just like, beep, and like hopped down, walked over to me and like didn't understand. And then did it a second time because he was like just had no idea what he did was
Yeah,
wrong. So the second time I
his
had to
little
use my
Loki face.
serious voice.
Yeah,
Uh anyway, that was a mega tangent, but it was still so mind-blowing and
it
funny
was
to
so
me.
funny.
I just
But
was like, what is happening?
like with our and even what we were like doing during that visit that I was visiting for a few days, we were like I would love to like talk about how we were like
Yeah.
making content to
Uh,
put like on social media and stuff, and like in the same vein of like attention seeking. I remember it was it was so weird to do, and
mhm.
we were like the whole time we were like people do this professionally, like they do
Yeah.
this as a career, and
Yeah.
like and people make a ton of money doing this. And I
I
remember it was just so like
know.
because it was so amazing, like it was really eye-opening to me because this was my first time like sitting down, coming up with a plan, making content like I'd never done that before. And it took us like an entire day to like
Mm-hmm.
do the things that we did. And it was so involved. And I was just like, wow, there's like a lot there. It was so fucking fun. And I cannot wait to see some of them once we get them finished.
Yes.
But
But it's a whole thing,
yeah.
even like creating content, like anytime because I didn't have a social media situation following website. Well, I didn't know I had a website, but I didn't have a social media following situation until I started doing Write Your Way to Freedom. And when I started doing that, because I kind of like, to me, it was like a necessary evil. I was like, I don't really want to be on Instagram or Facebook all day long posting content like 3 times a day. Like, no, thank you. But even just doing a little bit, because I still like knew I had to do a little bit to like share with the world what I'm doing, because if you don't do that, no one knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um and it was such a thing to grow through, because the first few times I would post something, I would be like like I'm actually puking. I feel so nauseous, and a big part of why it felt so bad for me was because I was afraid of being coming across as attention seeking.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and now I think I've moved into this place where I just joke that the whole life is a simulation and it's funny, and I'm just gonna like post whatever I want and nothing's real. And that's just totally a
Yeah.
coping mechanism.
I mean, I'm down for that. Let's come up with some really good
that
coping mechanisms to just
That's my
make it
coping
through.
mechanism. That's my coping
Uh-huh.
mechanism for posting on social media, because I just have
I
to
like
take
it.
it not so seriously. Because I'm just like, it really
Mhm.
isn't at the end of the day that serious. Like, go out.
Mm.
And because also I've really come to believe, and it helps me so much, like, because to think about the advice I would give other people. Like, I would never tell someone
Mhm.
not to post on social media, because, like, who cares? I would be like, just post wherever you want. Like, literally the opposite of
Yeah.
who cares? Like,
Right,
you know,
right.
it can be like, who cares? No one cares. Or like, who cares? Like, fucking do it anyway. Like, people are, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had such a big fear about it being attention seeking, and I had to just kind of like really, I mean, that still lingers, but it's more of like, it's not something I'm like, I refuse to let that keep me small, is more of like where I've come
Yeah,
to.
what would the story been if you did let that keep you small and you were like not, I mean, I'm sure you would have found another way to like do the things you're wanting to do, but I feel like this is like a good example of what we're talking about, like the old belief systems, limiting belief systems, things that keep us small. And in with rapidly growing technology, and we're like having to adjust so fast, and kind of even like what you said, like the generations beneath us aren't dealing with these, aren't going to be really dealing with these same limiting beliefs to the extent that we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for them, social media is just connection, communication, a way to be seen, a way to be visible on a larger scale. And it's different, and we have all these biases that we have to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the questions is like where, and it comes down to even deeper layers of like what you believe about your own self-worth and
Mm-hmm.
your voice, the validity of your voice and what you have to
Mm-hmm.
share with the world.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I mean, I know I felt that. I know I felt like nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
cares. Nobody. And you know what? Most people don't. Like, the truth is, like actually nobody really cares anyways. But I think that like showing up there, and this podcast has been such a great like example in this, is like the people that have reached out and said, wow, this like you said this thing and it helped me see something I never saw, or it encouraged me in a way that I didn't even know I needed. And I'm just like, I am so glad that I addressed or am addressing those things that wanted to keep me small, so that this person across the country could listen to our voices and like feel
Totally.
loved.
Because
Like it's so worth it.
that's, I think, where we grow the most, is when we hear similar stories and we're like, or things that we can relate to, and we're like, okay, this person dealt with that in this way, and it's just like so powerful. And I'll say, like, people
Mhm.
often say, "Oh, I know, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but like, thank you for saying that on your podcast or something like that. It really like resonated with me." And I'm like, listen, we wouldn't, at the end of the day, we wouldn't keep doing this if there was like zero listeners, probably, and zero, and people were like, this
We would just
doesn't
talk we would go
resonate
back
with
to
any of us.
FaceTiming each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, to say to people that something like is meaningful for you, and just kind of reflecting back your experience is so important. That's literally why people tell their
Mm.
stories. And it's not something you get used to. I still, like, anytime someone shares something like that with me, it like hits me straight in the heart. It's like that like reaction, that feeling has not dampened over hearing it
Mm.
many times.
Mhm.
And so I think that's important to know, especially for people in your life who have like had an impact on you. Like, you should reach out and tell them that they had an impact on you. It's like
Yeah.
it like adds fuel to their fire, and like keeps them like doing the thing. And I actually think that's very different from like just needing external validation. I actually think it's like mirroring back, like, this helped me, is like
This is
how we know to
valuable.
keep doing more things that are like valuable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, like, yeah, so I think that it feels different from just like desperately needing external validation, because it's like there's like meaning to it.
Hmm.
And
I love
I
I
mean,
love this I
that's
love this point.
important.
Yeah. I love this thought about it's just making me think about like who could I like reach out to or like say like thank you for the thing? Like cuz I do think there's this belief that it's like oh they don't care. They're too busy. Like they don't care what I think. But when I look back and I think about the times I have reached out to an author or a social
Mhm.
media person or an artist and
Mhm.
I've shared how meaningful something was, the response is always I've always gotten like oh my god thank you. Actually, I have a story, and I know we're gonna need to wrap up, but one of my favorite musicians, his name is Sean Rowe.
Mhm.
Shout out to Sean. He's got the most beautiful, rich, deep, like soulful voice. And I saw him perform here in Asheville at the Mothlight, R.I.P. But he was performing and he wrote a song for his sister who passed away. And
I
this
remember
song
this. I just got
single-handedly
chills.
like yeah, helped
Mhm.
me process my mother's death.
Mhm.
And I would just listen to it over and over and crying because I was just like that's the feeling. Like he
Mm.
captured the grief I was feeling or was very close to this idea of grief I was feeling and he captured it in this art and it helped give me a channel to express this. And I remember I saw him at the Mothlight and I was just like I'm going to talk to this dude, and I am like the last person to want to go up and talk to like anybody like famous or anything like that. I'm like no, I like that's
Mhm.
mortifying to me. But I was like I have to tell him. I have
Mhm.
to tell him how much the song moved me. And I remember I was talking to him and I shared with him about that and I'm like crying and
Mhm.
his eyes are welling up with tears and he was like the gratitude he expressed to me for sharing that with him and the look on his face I was like I don't know maybe people don't share the sincerity of like the impact as much as I think that they do. You know what I
Mm-mm.
mean? Like
They don't.
I'm feeling like I'm assuming that he's just got lines of people like saying this shit to him, but maybe
Mhm.
not. Like maybe not in that like the depth of sincerity in that way, you
But
know?
I
And it
think
was impactful. It was amazing.
it's not even just that there's like a volume, because that assumes that
Mm,
if there was a volume, then it would be unnecessary. I think exactly what I was trying to say is that even if there
mm.
was like a line of people who did do that to him at the end, I mean, for me anyway, it would still be like each would be
Still be
just as
valuable.
meaningful. And that's
Yeah,
like what I
yeah, I
really have
love
like
that.
learned over the years. Like, it doesn't, I don't know. But I see people saying it. They're like, obviously, you know that you do so much. Thanks, or whatever. But then like they share their story of how it particularly impacted them, and I'm like, just because there's like many doesn't mean that like this is like less meaningful to me. Like, each of you mattered to me
Mm,
so much. And when I get a glimpse into
yeah.
your life, it's like it's my favorite thing to like get a
It's like,
glimpse into how
that's
it's
why I'm doing
literally,
this.
I'm doing
Yeah.
it to like help as many people as I can. And if you tell me that it's working, I'm going to keep making things better, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. And I think
Yeah.
it's something I've like really tried to do more of, is like sharing with people how they've impacted me. Um and not, and
I think that would
even
be a
it doesn't
good
matter.
practice. Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter how like big they are, you know. I still try to. I like, there's even this little like, I've even responded to like emails, like people's email lists I've been on, where I'm like, don't even need your services anymore, but whoever's doing your emails is doing a really lovely job.
Oh, that's
um
amazing.
I try to do that. So it's huge. It's
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So important. Oh,
Well, I
well,
appreciate you.
I appreciate you. I'm proud. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us for
Ah.
showing up and keeping showing up here and doing this. And even when it's hard and life is fucking hard sometimes.
That's another
Yeah.
thing that's weird. I think years ago I'd be uncomfortable saying like, I'm proud of us for showing up and doing a podcast after you cried a little, like, but it's all, I really like, I noticed that like judgment flash through my mind, like, but dude, whatever. We're fucking trying our best, and
Mm-hmm.
I am
I
proud of
know.
us. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah, because
say.
it would be easy to just not. It would be easy to fucking be like, no,
No, today
I'm
doesn't
not
feel
doing it.
good. I'm not
You
going to
know.
do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or
So that's why I'm proud of us.
it would be, I think, another weird layer of easy to fake it or something. I don't even know if
Pretend,
that's
yes,
easier.
100%.
We
That
can't, we're
seems
not very good at
exhausting.
pretending.
We're not good at,
Some
yeah,
people are, though.
totally. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, till
Aw.
next time, my friend, I love you.
Yeah. I love you.